It's an honor, as always, to have Margaret Enloe here as our interviewee. I think we've done this maybe 3 or 4 times before, but I always learn something new.
Not 4, but not 4.
No, how many times have we done it? 3? Well, every time we do it, I love it. As I was saying, I learn something from Margaret almost every time I speak with her, whether it be before a big crowd or just one-on-one. She does so much for this group that I think flies under the radar most of the time. And I want to just take like 10 seconds to remind everybody that Margaret continuously shows the meaning of giver's gain in almost every single way. It's not always just a referral that is the meaning behind giving. She gives her time to any event that any of us have. She gives her attention to most everything that all of us are promoting. She supports us both financially and spiritually and emotionally and in so many ways that just a good person would, which makes her an outstanding coach.
Thank you.
And so I'm looking forward to now sharing a little bit about her story and where she's at professionally, so that hopefully all of you can walk out of here today thinking about Margaret in ways that you can incorporate maybe Margaret in your own lives, but certainly in those that you care most about, because she is one of the most caring people I've ever met.
True.
So for that, thank you. And I think you deserve it. So you have a nice little audience here that you've built in yourself, some family and some friends and some people that you've worked with before. Yes, Anne's raising the roof. I don't blame you. For those of you that are just maybe getting to know Margaret recently because you're a new member here, she grew up in Irvington, New York, right?
Right.
And you have 3 children and a lovely husband, Stephen, who I've gotten to know as well. Steve, sorry. And professionally, you started as an attorney, right?
Correct.
And then, and it was big firm stuff, like the real smart attorneys, when they graduate, they get these fancy jobs, not like me. And she was so good at what she did, she got sucked into PricewaterhouseCoopers, right?
Yep.
As in-house counsel, where you practiced for how many years in-house?
27.
27 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, one day, they told you couldn't
Had to retire.
What's
had to
that all
retire.
about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The big 4 accounting and consulting firms, EY, Deloitte, KPMG, they have a mandatory retirement age at 60 for partners. Or you can retire earlier as a partner if you're fully vested, starting around age 55. So you kind of know it's coming up, and that's just how the big 4 accounting firms handle it.
So they knock on your door, or you knew going in that at some point they were going to say, sorry, here's your retirement. Hopefully you got some sort of a package along with that, push out the door. And you had some decisions to make with your own life, much like your clients, which we'll talk about in just a moment. What made you feel as though the transition from what you were doing professionally to becoming a coach made sense to you?
Really, there were 3 things. One, I could continue to help people in a slightly different way that I'd help them as an attorney, but still it's helping people through difficult situations. And second, I'd have more control over my life. You're at the beck and call of attorneys, opposing counsel, judges. When you're a litigator, working on litigation or SEC investigations at a law firm or in-house the way I was. So that was really the second reason. And the third reason, I got coaching myself when I was about 1.5 years from retirement. And I thought, gee, this is really interesting. I found it helpful, and it helped me make a smooth transition out of my role at PwC into a new career. And so I was in my training for becoming a coach, working with about 30 other people who came from various walks of life, but they were all interesting, educated, fun people. And I thought, if that's the kind of people I'm going to be associated with if I start this new career as a coach, then I'm okay with that. So.
I love it. So something that we didn't talk about beforehand, which I had it kind of lingering in my mind to ask you, what's the difference between, and of course there's an educational difference, but the difference between what you do and what a psychologist, a therapist would do? The approach is different, the education is different. Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. In both therapists and coaches are meant to ask good questions and to listen very attentively to their client. But one of the main differences is that therapist has a client, whereas in a coaching engagement, you are a partner with your client. You're working on something together. And that is really, in essence, the main difference. It's obviously the education is quite different, but the relationship of coach and client is a partnership. So, and I guess one other thing I mentioned is that in coaching, very often there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to that engagement. It's understood up front that you're going to be engaged for maybe 3 months, or maybe it's 6 months. I've had engagements for a year. But you know that's the time frame around which you're going to be working on some specific goals, which you set up early in the engagement. In therapy, it's a little bit more, let's go into the past, let's think about what these issues are. How are you feeling about that? Whereas coaching is a lot much more, what are your goals? What are we going to do to act on those goals? And you anticipate an end to that engagement in light of the goals.
So this might be a good opportunity to go into a little bit more detail with someone that you maybe have worked with recently or at any point in your career as a coach as to how that kind of fits or how it lays out or how you felt successful at the end of that journey with that particular client. Do you have anyone in particular that you can talk about?
I mentioned this client I had in my short commercial. And he worked, as I said, at a large construction company. And he knew what he was doing, but his emotional intelligence was a little on the weak side. His positive intelligence, which some of you have worked on with me as well, was on the weak side. And though he knew the mechanics of everything he was supposed to do, he was, as I said earlier, tough on his team. And so there was a lot of complaints about Jack filtering up to him. And he was kind of on the verge of getting fired. I was brought in as his coach by the company. And one of the things that we do in that kind of situation is I do what's called 360 reviews. I interview people who Jack reports to, people that are his peers, people that are direct reports to Jack. I get information from them on an anonymous basis. I pull it together in a report for Jack to read. And based on input from that, as well as my discussion directly with the supervisor, pull together a development plan. So Jack gets this benefit of the input. It's confidential. He developed goals with me, but the essence of it, he understood was I need to continue to build my team, to be a leader of my team, but not to be yelling at them, using on occasion foul language to get them motivated. I need to listen a little better. I need to be calmer. And so he and I developed the mantra, calm in the storm. And I would say to him throughout the entire engagement, how were you with the calm in the storm? With words to that effect. And he would recount to me situations that came up and whether it kind of made his blood boil a little bit. How did he handle that? And over the course of that was a 9-month engagement. He was able to take these situations that really got him mad, and he would like tell somebody off, to understanding where they were coming from, ask some questions, talk to them in a way that they could absorb and learn from, so the next time they'd be in a better position not to do it. So, as I said earlier, he ended up being on one of the largest engagements of, I said New York, but really of the entire construction firm, because it's a national firm, and clearly was not being fired. Its team, it's something that Jack is going to have to continue to work on, but he has the tools now to do that.
And this was a 3-month engagement?
No, this was a 9-month engagement.
9 months, sorry.
No. Okay. Jack needed a lot of attention.
have you gotten any reporting back from Jack for his company and how he's doing now?
Yeah, I did. In fact, I reached out to him, and this is only about 3 months ago, and the engagement ended probably a year ago. I said, Jack, how is it going? And he said, well, let's set up a call. We talked for half an hour. Yeah, he said, I finished that large project. I'm here at the firm. Things are going well. I still am paying attention to how I'm interacting with people and the language that I'm using. But he, as I said, he was kind of on his way out. And he came back and I checked in with him and he's doing fine.
Okay, now as far as niches go,
Yeah.
this is the first time I've heard that you've worked with a construction-related entity.
Yeah.
Normally, I think about you in terms of if someone's retirement, if being either forced into retirement or considering retirement. Professionals, typically lawyers, much like yourself,
Right.
are the people that you feel most comfortable with. Is that a fair assessment of the kind of niche that you would kind of claim to have here in this room, or is it more expansive than that? Why don't you let everybody know who you'd like to work with?
Sure. I think about it as people in transition with a niche working with lawyers because of my background. I keep up my legal license. I know a lot of lawyers. I know a lot of law firms. But people in transition could be career people who want to transition into another career. I have a client right now, an attorney. He wants to become a judge. So that's the transition I am helping him with. Another might be transitioning into another job. A lot of people don't really like their jobs. They tend to be younger people who are figuring out where they want to go and they don't like certain job. They might get help from me in transitioning into another career or just sorting out where do they want to go with their lives at this point in their lives. And then third, as you mentioned, Jay, people transitioning into retirement. And it's not an easy niche. I've had this niche for a while, and a lot of people, I think, heading into retirement think, I know what I want to do. I can figure that out. And of course, many people can figure that out. But there are a lot of people that are not that happy with that transition. They think, oh, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to play golf. I'm going to get on a board. Well, a lot of them don't get on boards. A lot of them, turns out, golf is not so easy to learn at age 65. And they start feeling not lost, but a little bored. So I love to help people that are transitioning into retirement, not at the time they're doing it, but maybe like a year and a half before they're thinking about retirement.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right, now I've got to ask you a couple more questions and then we can wrap this up.
Sure.
And you'll be off the hot seat. Who would you say has been maybe not the most important, but the most profound influence on your life?
Oh, I would probably say my father. He's passed away, but he was somebody who had Brett referred to it, business council for the UN. I mean, working in conjunction with the United Nations, which is often not a popular organization, and working and building an organization to get business and industry more aware of what the United Nations is doing and then supporting it monetarily, but also meeting people at the United Nations. This is something he worked on for a long, long time and built it up into a really successful organization. And Brett ended up being one of the photographers for their events. So I saw my father, he was actually a Presbyterian minister in his first life, and he transitioned into this other career and was very successful. And he also was somebody, he had a lot of judgment. You know, in coaching, you're not supposed to judge people. He kind of had a lot of judgments about what was good and what was bad and not doing homework, for example, on Sundays. But he always had the view with me and my sister that you as young women are going to have a career. You're going to make a good living. You're going to, he never said you're going to compete with the men, but he was basically saying, you're going to be doing whatever you want to do. And that was probably a good 20 years before a lot of the norm was to say that to young women. He did that from the very beginning.
All right, last question for you. And then I want to remind the audience of one last thing before you go. What are the events and circumstances of your life that have shaped or influenced the way that you go about your coaching? Anything else?
Okay, sure.
I mean, aside from the forced retirement.
Aside from the forced retirement, yeah. I think one thing, I dealt with breast cancer back in 2008. I went through chemo, my hair fell out. That was a pretty big thing in my life, and I continued to work throughout that time, but I kind of stepped back and took it a little easier. A second thing is one of my daughters dealt with anorexia. So that was something my husband and I had to deal with. It's not easy. A lot of parents, I'm sure some of you in this room are in some way dealing with that or know people that are. I have the knowledge of what it takes as a parent to get through that. And as an individual to get through a difficult illness. And I got through it. I'm fine. And I think the third thing, Jay, is I had, I told Arthur, you about this yesterday, a bad accident in 2011 where I fell in an indoor rock climbing gym. wasn't harnessed in properly. I crashed to the ground about 25 feet up. And I was lucky to survive that. I'm lucky not to be paralyzed. I'm lucky to still be playing tennis sometimes. And so those experiences are pretty significant ones that allow me to be more empathetic with my clients. And different clients bring different issues to bear. And I don't say, oh, yeah, that reminds me of X, Y, and Z. No, I just listen with knowledge and appreciation for what they're going through.
Well, we are all lucky, too, especially to have you in this room. Margaret heads our review committee. Once a year, all of the members go through a series of questions just to touch base with how they're doing, how they're feeling, how the group is treating them, and vice versa. And Margaret, you've done an excellent job of coaching people up, helping the leadership team privately, and you're a wonderful consultant and a wonderful person and an excellent coach, and we are all lucky to have you. Thank you.